All right, welcome, welcome, welcome. We have Amanda Serfozo here to talk about all things UX. I'll
Mhm.
let you do an introduction for yourself.
All right, sounds good. Thank you, Dr. Riley. I am Amanda Serfozo. I am a UX content strategist here at Capital One. I'm based out of Richmond. And let's see, what can I tell you about myself? I oversee what's called the growth portfolio. So at Capital One, we have different portfolios, which are different sort of like what we call parts of a customer journey. So as you are a new customer, as you use your credit cards or your bank accounts, and then as you sort of like grow with those products, I'm on that end of the spectrum with the growth part. So how you use your cards, grow into them, and think about like long term, how you want to like use your relationship with us. That's sort of what I oversee. So overseeing credit wise, if you've ever heard of that app, I oversee credit wise, offers and account management. So how you sort of customize your line or ask for a credit line increase, things like that. And then what else? Partnerships is another one as well. So if you look at REI or BJ's or Kohl's or Williams Sonoma, all of those are actually Capital One cards. So we service those cards and run those cards as well. So I oversee a lot in that portfolio and specifically like content strategy that kind of runs through all of that.
Awesome. So
Yeah.
let's get into the questions. Students submitted questions that they had about UX,
Yep.
about the user experience, etc. So our first one,
Mm.
I think, is a great one because we were talking in class about how UX really needs the customer's experience, right? You're designing the customer experience. You want to have them in mind, but you also want to hear from them. How
Mhm.
do you feel like is the best way that you would recommend that companies, marketers, UX people get feedback from customers specifically on their UX?
Yeah, so this is one of the biggest functions of like my day to day. This is a lot of what I do. So when I say I do content, what I really mean is I'm doing a lot of research as part of that. So UX research. We do something called user testing. So usertesting.com is like a platform that we use to test prototypes, and prototypes are basically mock-ups or sketches or drafts of like a design basically. We put those designs into user testing, basically sort of like a fake scenario that we give customers to accomplish a task, or imagine you are paying a bill, or imagine you are reviewing your credit score, taking them through a series of those tasks. And like literally what we're doing now is recording the screen, watching them move through each step, and then observing how they're able to accomplish that. We use something called like it's a matrix or a synthesis document. It's like really just long word for just a document where we capture like those responses. We're able to sort of look for points of what we call friction, areas where people are getting caught up in things that maybe they're stumbling over what a word means. Maybe they're stuck on a screen and they don't know how to like move forward or go back or click on something. We look for all of that. And through user testing, we're able to sort of let them move through that flow, capture where things are going right or wrong, and then synthesize or distill that down into what are the takeaways. So, kind of telling a story about like, here's what we tested, here's where people got tripped up, and here's what we think we need to do differently. So user testing is the biggest one by far. There's another one called D-Scout. So D-Scout is more of a longer term study. So we have research partners that, for instance, if you wanted to do a study on like attitudes or behaviors around using bank accounts or savings accounts or specific types of credit cards. A D-Scout study is almost like a longer term study where we give people journaling prompts almost day to day of like, how are you feeling? How are you like check in with us? How are you feeling today? How did you feel doing this task? Were you able to like get through your day with like this app that we're asking you to use. So it's more of like a longer term longitudinal type of study that will maybe run from a week or so to a couple months and collecting that data. So it really runs the gamut, but for our team, user testing by far is where we get those customer sort of pieces of feedback. And then from there, that allows us to really tweak our designs. So we improve upon things, sometimes things we didn't even think about. Do we need to add a link somewhere? Do we need to explain something in better detail? When you're really close to the work, you kind of like aren't aware of those blind spots almost.
Right.
So doing something through user testing allows us to reveal that and then sort of like create a game plan for, okay, how are we going to change this, improve upon it, and then build the actual thing that gets released into the public for everyone. So yeah. Yeah.
How do you incentivize customers and pick customers? Do you just ask everybody and then whoever volunteers, or
Yep.
are you like going through a third party research company? How does that
Yeah.
recruitment of the customers process work for you guys?
Great question. We do internal testing. So sometimes we'll do associate testing. For example, something that I've been working on asks developers to take a look at this documentation, let us know if this is like good or not, or if we need to like improve upon this or not. For something that's internal, we will send out like, hey, you could get like a gift card, or you could get we'll send you some sort of like freebie or some sort of incentive like that. That's very much internal, associate facing. For what I just mentioned with user testing, we have data analysts that we work with and business analysts that sort of help us understand what the product is, who we're targeting, what is the audience. For instance, like a head of household, a certain FICO score, a certain income, a certain industry or line of business that you work in. You can really slice that data into however you want it to look like. And what user testing does is when people sign up to be a participant on user testing, they fill in those pieces of like biographical information almost. So when we launch a study, we're tapping into all of user testing's sort of like database of participants, but we're narrowing it down into those types of customers. For user testing, I believe they pay $10 per test. So people are very motivated to get on there and do these tests. Some people literally do this as like a side thing all day if they are like eligible for the test, depending what is being tested. But for that, the eligibility is like a $10 reward. So that's paid out by user testing, but we use, user testing from Capital One side to sort of like recruit those participants. So
Got it. Cool.
yeah.
Any tool that you would recommend or platform that students can kind of explore, or something
Yeah.
for somebody just starting out with UX to use?
I think user testing is the biggest platform that's being used by, your Google, Facebook. We certainly use it. I know there are others out there, but user testing is by far the most popular. So I would say, like, if you're a student and this is like interesting to you, get on user testing and sign up to be a participant. Take those tests. Like, not only is it super helpful for us as researchers to like hear firsthand like it's working from your perspective, but if you are kind of learning about UX, it also gives you just an inside perspective on what a prototype does, how it works. Some of the questions that we ask are pretty routine. So we'll have a series of questions that will repeat throughout each study, and you can get sort of closer to those questions. So it's a great way to just get involved with testing. You could make, some pocket change from doing it. And you can also just start to really learn how to build a test and build a prototype out. So highly recommend it. Love user testing all around.
Somebody one of the questions, I think you talked about like the taking the testing and then implementing it and going and doing the final design. Do you have any go-to colors that you think are best universally? I know it's probably different for a finance product, but what are your colors that you're seeing that are doing really good?
Yeah, I'd say not just so aside from just Capital One, like on the Capital One side, we have a set of like brand guidelines. So we have a series, basically a color palette of like approved colors that we can use. So that's like what we do. It's a lot of blues, muted blues and reds, lots of different variations of gray. One thing that we're very, very serious about is like accessibility. So using colors that have a certain like contrast point that's visible for like different levels of like, sight. That's a really big thing. It has to go through when we're building an experience, it actually has to go through several checkpoints to be like approved for accessible use. So colors that sort of stay within that sort of framework are really important. And then in terms of like, things that are just like sort of UX basics, I'd say as an industry, there's always your reds are for like error states, like, something didn't work. You have a red sort of button or a red sort of like a component somewhere that's like error. Green obviously means go, like green is like good. Same with like blues and yellows. I'm also seeing a lot of like gradient type of colors. So if you look at like startups or apps or things like that, you have a lot of these sort of like almost like very dreamy sort of color palettes I'm seeing. This is like, again, not Capital One's thing, but UX as an industry. You're seeing a lot of almost like pastel, sort of like cosmic almost colors. I'm seeing a lot of that, which is cool. It's almost like chewing back to the 90s. Like, you have a lot of like 90s trends coming back. We're seeing it with fashion, we're seeing it with music. It's everywhere. We're kind of going back to that 90s aesthetic. So that's another one. But on the whole, I'd say there are definitely certain palettes in UX that are like kind of the gold standard of error states, success states, caution states that you want to stick to. So,
Okay,
yeah.
good to know. So I know, let's talk a little bit about where UX lives
Mhm.
on the team.
Yeah.
So you're not a graphic designer, you're not a website designer,
Yep.
but you're working in tandem with them. Let's a preview of what are all the kind of roles that are involved in trying to make sure that the website or app is
Yep.
usable and
Yep. So we kind of think of ourselves as you'll hear cross-functional a lot. So kind of what that means is everyone wears their hat, right? So everyone is a specialist in what they do. On the design side, on the design team, you usually will have a UX UI designer. That's someone that's probably closest to a graphic designer. That's someone that does all the visual elements. They are designing like what we call components or little symbols or pieces of design that get brought into the app, the website, whatever it is that we're building. Those are your sort of graphic designers, UX, UI designers. They design interfaces. Then you have someone like me, content designer. I'm a designer with words. So my focus is designing for functionality, ease of use, understanding, comprehension, but I do it with words. So I partner very closely with those visual designers so that they play their part, I play my part, and those both pieces come together into something that's really, really easy and simple to use. We have researchers, I just mentioned user testing researchers that really are like cutting up the data and understanding for this particular subset of people. We need to be focusing on this in the design. So they'll sort of inform what we're designing and how we're using words throughout. And then aside from like sort of your core design team, we have product partners. So product partners are sort of like driving the intent of like the work or like what it is that we're building and why. So like always coming back to like what's our why, what are metrics of success that we're trying to aim for, things like that that's coming from the business side of like what Capital One as a business wants to accomplish and then sort of informing the design from that perspective too. We have tech partners. So those are a lot of your like web developers, people that are hard coding. They are like writing code and doing a lot of the back end work that is completely over my head, but they are really experts at engineering basically. And then I think the last sort of partner that we work most closely with is legal. So legal partners are incredibly important in helping us pass compliance, regulation, just financial standards that when we need to like protect ourselves as an industry, it passes all those standards for what is like, regulatory, up to snuff on that stuff. So we have partners that review every single word, every single detail, everything we design for, sort of as almost a last checkpoint. They will go through and review all of that, make sure it's all checking those boxes. So there's a lot of partners. You would think of it as like your bubble is your core design team. Those are the people that you're really working with day to day. And then sort of all of your kind of people kind of orbiting that sort of support the build and design of that product. So you're working with a lot of people, and it's everybody's got their perspective, their opinion. They're coming from a different sort of vantage point for like what it needs to do, the product needs to do. So that's why when we talk about testing, that is so crucial and important, because you strip away everyone else's perspective of what should, it should accomplish, the website, app, whatever it is you're building. And the users are telling us what is working and what's not. Ultimately, at the end of the day, that is what matters. We can have our own goals and intent and all of that, but usability, it just baseline needs to work. And so that's why we spend so much time on that research piece. But yeah, there's a lot of moving parts and a lot of people involved.
Definitely sounds like it.
Yeah.
So going back to kind of the design of the words,
Yeah.
how do you balance brevity with the need to provide enough robust information?
Yeah, this is literally my biggest challenge all day, every day. I think especially in the financial space where you're dealing with like really complex topics. And sometimes you are so constrained for space. Maybe you have like a line or two of text max, or
Mm.
you have 25 characters max. The real estate or the area that you have to display information can be so small sometimes. So it's really refinement. So you start with like your big idea of like what needs to be said, or what's the sort of like message, and you keep whittling that down over and over and over again. And sometimes it literally just looks like you sitting in a room and like talking out loud about like the simplest version of the thing that needs to be said. And you can try, there's different ways of employing like abbreviation or truncating things in certain ways, or is there a way to replace a long word with a very short word? Is there a way to sort of like negotiate with like those partners, like I said, where maybe we don't need to include all of the like disclosures or terms in a piece of content. Maybe we can like put that somewhere else, kind of below the fold or somewhere in like the actual terms and conditions, and not the main message. So it's really like refining something, simplifying it to the best of your ability, and also just negotiating with those partners for maybe additional space, or maybe we can say things differently to simplify and then add additional information somewhere else where we have more space to really like flesh that out instead of one line of text. But it's really tough. That is why, content designers, it looks very simple. The end result often looks very simple, but the work that goes into it is often many, many, many hours of just refining something and simplifying it. And what is often so simple is just a lot of work to get there. So yeah, it's an art and a science and a really a balancing act, but that's the toughest part. So you have to have a lot of patience with yourself and with others, I think, to get there. Yeah.
Awesome, cool. Sounds kind of like what we do is in academic writing.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about platforms. So
Yep.
we talked a bit about websites and mobile. Are you doing social and email or?
I'm not doing social. So social, we have so on my side, it's really the user experience, the usability, how an app or website or something like that works. We do have marketing and brand. So marketing partners are doing a lot of social. They're doing a lot of those social campaigns. They're doing your TikToks and your reels and all of that stuff. So they're doing more creative storyboarding for like what that campaign looks like, and bringing in all your celebrities, your Taylor Swift, your like, all those folks. So that's super fun. We get to hear a little bit about what they're doing, and they will often market the things that we are like building. So we're doing sort of the build, and they're kind of publicly facing of like telling, folks about our Venture X cards and our like travel, like new lounges and different airports, doing the sort of like front facing work there. So they're more involved with that. And then we also have brand, and brand is sort of like supports our marketing partners in a way. And they'll do a lot of the work as far as like I said, what those like colors are, and like what our just guiding principles are, and what's standard, like what is core to our brand, what Capital One kind of looks and feels like. So they'll work on that stuff. But in terms of me, I'm not doing social. I do some email. So I've done email. This was a couple years ago. It sort of changed hands a bit into more of the marketing side. But email is a really important part of, if you look at a full experience, say for something that's like an alerts experience, say your credit score dropped or went up by a certain number of points, we let you know that. There would be an email that's triggered that when that happens, we not only will alert you in the app or send out like a push message or something like directly to your phone, but there's an email that goes with that as well. And so designing that email, what it says, what are the like parts of that email, the header image, the body, the buttons, the like sort of sign in to see what changed. That's all part of that email design as well. And so it just depends on the project, depends on the work, but I'd say now more than ever, I'm sort of saying like, here's where an email should go. Here's like what the trigger would be.
Mhm.
And then we sort of like look to marketing to sort of actually write and build that out. We're doing the strategy as far as like what those alerts are, and then the actual emails themselves are designed and built by more of marketing and brand these days, and
Got
then
it. Okay.
developed and whatnot by tech partners. So
Got
yeah,
it.
yeah.
So from your experience, or from your position, do you does everything that happens on mobile happen on desktop, or do you have to prioritize one platform over the other?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have mobile. So our mobile app is like the Capital One app. So on iPhone, Android, that's mobile. Then we also have like native. So native is if you are going to Capital One from like a browser, like a web browser, in Chrome or Safari, whatever your web browser is. There are slight differences between the two. So what is built on mobile and what is built native, in a browser. Sometimes there's nuances and there's differences in the way those are built. Sometimes it's a tech constraint. The app can support something that the website can't. Most often the website can support the thing, but the app cannot, just because the tech isn't there yet, or like a certain like part of that site isn't like built yet for the app. So sometimes they're not a mirror image of each other. And so we have to just kind of make it as close to each other as possible. And that's the thing that we try to do most of all, is even if it doesn't look exactly the same, there's a little bit of like nuance from mobile to web. Like we try to make at least the basics of, a button or a call to action or something the same. And then have what's called parity, which is when they mirror each other. That's sort of the end game. Like that's the goal, is to like have parity between the two. So no matter where you're coming to something from, no matter what device or browser or app, that it would all look the same everywhere. That's kind of where we're trying to go. But it's a balancing act. And I would say in terms of like where people are using coming into Capital One from, I'd say the app and mobile by far is where people are using that the most. So we mostly build for mobile experiences. And then as sort of a secondary to that, we'll build for web, we'll build for desktop or whatever that is. So focus is mobile 9 out of 10 times. And then, we switch gears to what is native from there. So
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Good to know.
Yeah.
I was kind of wondering, like, how do you prioritize? With the
Yeah.
customer drive that? And it sounds like they kind of do
They
because
kind of
the
do.
mobile
Yeah.
board.
And
So
it also depends too. I mentioned we have like data analysts and business analysts. So for a specific like experience, say something related to your credit line increase, if we're looking across all of our customers, like the millions of customers that are, say, requesting a clip, and we're seeing that like the vast majority of them are on mobile, like we will design for a mobile experience. If there's an experience where like for some reason we're seeing a lot of people on desktop, they just want to accomplish this thing on the computer, a desktop computer, like then we can focus from there. So it really comes down to the data that we're looking at. What are we looking at building? What are we looking at improving upon? And like where are those customers sort of hanging out at? We have data to sort of inform that. And sometimes it is the opposite. Sometimes, we'll build for web first and then mobile kind of comes down the line. From where I've been from, I started in 2018 and I've been, there ever since. It's almost switched. I'd say like earlier on 2018 it was a lot more like for web. Now it's mostly mobile. So in the past couple of years, we've just seen everyone sort of go to mobile. And then of course, giving the option to do something on, desktop web. But really the source of like truth, like where everyone's at is mostly mobile. So that's kind of where we're hanging out at and really designing for we designed with Apple kind of first, your Apple products first. However, it's interesting that there are more Android users out there than Apple users. So we do both. Like we start with Apple as like that's our sort of sandbox. We'll build something for, iOS, and then kind of on the other side of that design file, you'll see here's all the Android stuff. And so it's slightly different for an Android screen, but pretty much matches what an Apple experience looks like too. So that's
okay.
kind of interesting. Yeah.
Speaking of like the preference of mobile versus desktop, I saw a post on Instagram that said it's the most millennial trait ever to
Yeah.
like say no, these are desktop activities versus versus mobile activities.
Yeah.
Thinking about like generational marketing
Yep.
and appeal and understanding of technology,
Yep.
how are you adjusting or factoring in and considering
Mhm.
a more mature audience in your designs versus maybe your primary target audience that might be younger? How do you balance the two?
We have and I don't have like a hard number to give you, but we have a large population of customers that don't even use phones or the website. They literally just are using the phone. And these are folks that we call them non-digitally enrolled. So like those that are literally just paying their bill by phone. We have people that
Like
are
calling.
calling in to, these are folks that, maybe, are 40 plus, I'd say. There's like in a certain age group that's like, obviously a little older, but they're paying exclusively by phone, or they are servicing something exclusively by phone. They do not have the app on their phone. They may not even have a smartphone at all. And so there are avenues that we designed for. It's called IVR, and that stands for something, but it's for phone servicing. It's like your phone tree. When you call into Capital One's 1-800 number, we've designed, a voice experience basically so that you can speak to, it's pretty much an AI, and say, hey, I'm so and so, this is my account. It'll look up your account, it'll tell you your balance, or it'll tell you, what's up with your account, and then you can like pay that way, or you can look for a transaction that way. So it's interesting. I have colleagues that exclusively just focus on IVR. So they are just building voice experiences, and also those that are working with agents. We have a lot of just amazing agents, call center agents that are servicing this all day long. And over a couple of years, I had a chance to like sit with those like agents to really like listen to like what calls are coming in, and the stories are crazy. I mean, you have people that for whatever reason, their preference is to call in and service their phone that way. It's how they just all they, it's how they've done it forever. They'll use their phone to service, or they're in the midst of a crisis. We had someone that I think was at like the hospital, their family was in the hospital. They like had to make a large transaction, to cover the cost of something. They, just called in because that was like the easiest thing to do rather than use the app or use something to like service their account that way. They wanted to call in and speak to a person. So we definitely have like, the focus primarily being like mobile web, that stuff. But there's absolutely a side of like the Capital One house that is like IVR, phone tree, phone servicing, and then the agent experience. And the agents are trained for every single like thing you can imagine. And there's just documentation and guidelines and just a wealth of knowledge for them to sort of navigate those like just edge cases, things that are like we can't even like fully even understand or represent in our experiences, but that people really need help with. Yeah, it runs the gamut in terms of like there's definitely a population that relies on us from a non-digital perspective by phone, and sometimes even fax or letter. Like there is a very small,
Wow.
even know, I'm gonna say like maybe 1%, like I don't know what the percentage is, but a very small percentage of people that are like mailing in their bill. So we cover all the bases, certainly focusing on the digital experience first, but there are those secondary ones that we give attention to too, because for whatever reason, wherever people are at, maybe they don't have access to internet, maybe they're just going through something, you just don't know. We're building for that too. So,
Sometimes it's just preference based, you know? Like
yeah,
I
that's
want
it.
to do it in this certain type of way, and
Yep,
for this one I do it this way, and for that one I do it this differently, but essentially it's the same
absolutely.
experience.
I know a gentleman that kind of lives in my neighborhood. He's maybe in his 70s or 80s, and he's like, I simply just will not use email and I will not use like the internet basically. And he gets by, like he does it, he's able to like call in, do what he's got to do, but he's old school. Like
Mhm.
it's still out there.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned AI a little bit. How do you see AI contributing to UX?
Yeah. It's interesting. There's been sort of like a debate on is this coming to like take all of our jobs? Are we going to like have robots designing for these experiences, or like what's happening with that? I was part of a cohort of content designers, I'd say in the last year. We've really studied this. Like we're trying to figure out like where this is going. Where we've pretty much landed is that AI is not coming for our jobs. So like, yay, it's going to really improve our jobs and make our lives easier. So it's going to reduce, when we say like cognitive load, it's going to reduce the like amount of manual thinking and designing that we have to do. For example, something that we do is like experience reviews. So every single experience that we design for, every little piece of usability goes through an experience review where someone is manually going down. I think it's almost 127-point checklist of does this pass accessibility, content, UI, legal, technical, all those checkpoints. We manually have to do that right now. So we have like a team of people. I'm on that team that we manually check that for quality control, basically. An AI, for instance, if you teach the AI what our standards are, what that quality control checklist is, it's like the year 3000, but like it's possible to teach it like what the checklist is and then have it do that checkpoint of like, is this passing, each of these controls? That's an example, like a use case that we like came up with. So this cohort, we all sat down, we're like, what are these use cases? One of those is the experience review. Another one is like designing for chat bots. That's like thinking about if you, instead of doing something manually on your app or on your phone, if you were to just have an AI, we already have one, it's called Eno. If you have an AI sort of like, check into if you were charged twice or if you were charged, erroneously or some mistake was made, the AI can sort of like do the digging to like find that for you. So you don't have to like page through all these different, pages or screens or drop downs to find what is going on. The AI can sort of find that for you. So for both designers and like for customers, like what I think is that it's really going to improve upon like what exists. It's only just going to make life a little bit simpler. You will just be able to ask it to do things. You'll be able to sort of lean on the AI to help you do your job better or to accomplish something faster. So that said, the caveat to that is that it's going to take time. So we need to sort of teach the AI like what we want it to learn. It's obviously not smart enough right now. It's like, you teach a dog a trick, like it's the same thing of like you need to sort of encode that thing for what it needs to do. And that's a very long process, a very technical process. Again, we have legal involved. Like there's a lot of like figuring out how that's going to work, but we're starting with small use cases to like kind of build from there. So something really simple we can have an AI do, for example, just run a script, like a chatbot script
Mhm.
of, hey, what did I buy on April 10th? And it can like sort of pull that up. And from there, we can build upon that to do something more sophisticated. So, I don't think we're going to be, taken over by robot overlords, but I think that the AI that we build is going to like enhance our lives in that way. So it's going to be cool to see. I'll be really interested. And, honestly, we're starting to see it already. I use something called, it's another great design tool in addition to user testing. If you want to check out Figma, Figma, that's where we design those prototypes. There are plugins already that will like automatically like correct grammar, or it will simplify some language, or it'll calculate how many characters may fit into a space. Those are all little things that you don't manually have to do. You can actually just have it running on the side and it will check that for you. So little things like that where you can sort of like lean on the AI to kind of be your wingman, be your wingwoman on like the build process, which is pretty cool. So we're seeing it already, but it's going to come in little bit at a time. So
Yeah, I wish I when I buy on April 10th, I'm like I was doing my taxes last night. I'm like
oh yeah.
I wish I could ask an AI bot to just
Yep.
pull a certain
Oh yeah.
recurring,
Yeah.
like
We
how much did I
actually
spend on Xfinity in 2023, and then it just do it. Like that would be amazing.
Actually, so if you go into Capital One, we have Eno is the name of it. It's like our bot. It's our chat bot, our AI kind of bot. And if you ask like what were my nonprofit donations in 2023, it will look across your accounts and actually give you that number specifically. It'll like do the math. There's also an email that got sent out to like sometime in January because we realized people are starting to do their taxes in January. It'll like give you the email and the line item, like here's all your item donations
Nice.
and give that to you directly. So like it's happening. We're thinking about things like that. What would make lives easier?
Yeah.
Use cases. What do people need to know? One of them is like you were charged twice or you left a really like huge tip. Like, was this accurate? Like we
Mhm.
kind of double check it for you. So little things like that, we're trying to build those and help people out that way.
Nice, nice.
Yeah.
Also AI, where
Mhm.
do you kind of see demands for UX and just
Yeah.
UX in general changing over the next 5 or 10 years?
Yeah, you know what? I think it's grown so much since I like have started as UX in, I always say like 2012, like right out of school. And we're starting to see a lot more like educational programs, a lot more degree programs, people really learning the ins and outs of this. So I think it's only going to continue to grow. The challenge is that we have maybe more UX designers than there are roles currently. So it's a very competitive market. That said, as there are more people have startups, there are just, there's so many opportunities out there. As there are more opportunities, I think there will be more open roles in that way. So it's just everything's growing. I'd see the demand for UX getting more and more and more. That said, it is really, really competitive. You have to know your stuff. You got to have a really solid portfolio. You have to know the design process, be able to speak to that in and out, and really just understand like why you are entering like UX. What is your purpose in that? And that's some of the stuff that'll help you stand out. But yeah, the industry is huge. The opportunities are huge. There's so many specialties you can really narrow in on. People are getting very technical. They're getting in, like I said, the AI part of that. There's so many like just fields of study that are starting to break out. One thing I'm trying to do is like trauma informed design. So understanding how trauma informs the way people think, how they spend money. Money is a how can we reduce the cognitive load, the stress that people are thinking about when they need to pay a bill or make a payment or pay someone, little things like that. So we're starting to see just areas of focus from the broader UX into what's more specialized. And so that's kind of the direction that I'm heading in next. So I'm pretty
Okay.
excited for that. But yeah, it's a very ripe industry for opportunity. So just get nerdy with it. There's a lot you can do, and a lot to learn and a lot of people to learn from.
So speaking of like a portfolio and things, I know you told me in our previous conversation that you're kind of growing your team.
Yep.
What goes in a portfolio? What does somebody look for, or what could somebody look for a
Yep.
great UX designer? What is the aspects that people can keep in
I
mind?
think the biggest thing is, and this is like sort of general. So a content designer versus UX UI designer will be looking for different things. But just speaking generally, I think the biggest thing that I look for is being able to speak to the design process. So that process is discovery. So discovering what the problem space is, understanding like where we have the opportunity to improve something, what's kind of wrong or what is what's a stressor or a pain point currently, that discovery piece, being able to like uncover that, then getting into the research, how you research the opportunity, like kind of where you need to go with this, how you can improve upon it, what the data is telling you about like a certain percentage of people that like need this idea that you have. And then I would say like being able to just tell a good story. Like every portfolio, we really complicate it. I think it's very simple. It just needs to follow a story arc. So problem, kind of process, what you did in the in between, like what were all the ups and downs and ebbs and flows and challenges you ran into and things you tried, maybe failed at, maybe succeeded at, telling that story of the messy middle, the in between, and then how you sort of like turned a corner, how you came out on the other side with, and then we learned, or and then we realized whatever your pivot point is, and then getting to your sort of like your kind of how you succeeded. So how you kind of tested the thing, you iterated upon it, and then you came out with a strong recommendation, or were able to convince a partner to go in a certain direction, or how you fix or solve something that's really tricky for someone. Telling that story is the greatest kind of thing of all that I look for. And it follows a story arc. And whether you want to call that sort of a formula, some people call it a formula, or just a set of steps that needs to be shown. I'd say any UX designer needs to understand the discovery, the research, and the story arc of how you got from pain point to solution, and all the little kind of in betweens there, backed up by research and data. It always has to come back to the research and the data, the usability testing, what customer said or what user said, verbatims, like what actually people said in quotes in testing. It all comes back to that. So from there, researchers will be looking for specific research methods. Content strategists like myself, I'll be looking for, how you used language, or how you like, approached brevity, or, shortened a complex piece of language, or, made something more human sounding than jargony or overcomplicated. There's little things that you would look for depending on what you're applying into or what you're looking for. So, But on the whole, it really comes down to that story. So check that out. You know, you can even get inspiration from Pixar and Disney. Like they are great storytellers. Like follow that sort of storyline, apply it to UX, and it's sort of the same thing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, that concludes the questions that I have for you. Anything to add that you want the students to
I
know?
no, I'm just so excited that you're teaching this. Like this did not exist. Like when I was like getting into UX, I had to cobble together my own weird like courses to like kind of get here. So I'm pumped that this exists and that you're doing this. I would say something that really like empowers me and excites me is mentoring. So I can drop my LinkedIn and my, you know, links to contact me, and anyone from your class is like welcome to follow up, send me a message, schedule a quick call with me. I can answer more questions in detail. I'm here for that. So
Awesome.
I'll send you the info and we'll add it in. But yeah, I'm
Thank you
excited
so
for
much.
this. Thank you, Jen. This was awesome. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too. All right.
Awesome.
Okay.
All
Thanks.
right. So are we gonna wrap up? Are we gonna like stop recording and chat? Or are we just gonna